Welcome to the Dr. and Mrs. Curry podcast, where the emphasis is on parenting related matters. My name is Dr. Joshua John Curry, and with me is my better half, Mrs. Cartrice Ellen Curry. Today's episode will concentrate on academic achievement of children. We will focus on circumstances parents could find themselves engaged in that could hinder the academic accomplishments of their children, from, of course, an all inclusive manner. We're going to jump right in with a subtopic of neglect and abandonment. I wanted to start off with an incident that I've replayed and I've shared during the past 29 years. This took place when I was in the fourth grade. And this is a story that, of course, we're not going to use any names of any students or any teachers, but this is a story that I've thrown at you many times throughout our, uh, our time together, throughout our marriage. I was in the fourth grade, 9 years old. And keep in mind that we're talking about neglect and abandonment and academic achievement. And we're going to have an array of other subtopics as we move along. I was in the fourth grade. And there was a student literally every day since the first day of school. He would come in pretty much around right before recess. If my memory serves me correctly, our recess was approximately 30 minutes long. And immediately following recess, this was the best time of the day. Immediately following recess, we had lunch. And our lunch, again, if my memory serves me correctly, lunch was about 30 to 45 minutes. So, of course, with all the time lined up in the hallways, walking to and from the schoolyard, to and from the cafeteria, it was a great time of the day. It was literally more than an hour of just being outside of the classroom, just being able to move around, being able to just have fun as a child, as a 9 year old. And these were, at least during this school, we were not in a position to go from class to class. So during those days, whatever classroom you were in that classroom all day from 8:45 a.m. until 2:45 p.m. Besides the breaks that you may get as far as using the restroom, recess, and the cafeteria. So this was a pretty significant time of the day. Now going back to this student would come in about 10 minutes, 15 minutes prior to recess. It was pretty apparent that he had some hygiene problems. It was pretty apparent that there were some issues going on at home. As a child, as a 9 year old, which most of us were in the fourth grade, as a 9 year old, we were not able to intellectualize or articulate what was taking place with this particular student, but we knew he was different. One thing, upon meeting him initially, we knew that he was different because he was a little bit bigger than us. He was 2 years older than us. So he was 11 years old when all of us were 9 years old. So we did learn that unfortunately circumstances took place in his life as far as not being able to experience academic achievement. And he was held back not just once, but twice. Also, during that school year, I do remember him starting to grow what resembled to be a mustache. Our teacher in this fourth grade class, she had a row in the back, and she was we were not allowed to sit in that particular row. She called that the dummy row. And this teacher, she was a lot older. She was in her a lot older in comparison to other teachers that we've had up to that point. She was in her late 50s, if my memory serves me correctly. So for a lot of us, she reminded us of our grandmothers. So whatever, so just like any adult, if an adult does something or an adult says something is okay, children, because we are at that age, we are so impressionable, we're going to go along with it. So whenever he will walk into class, each day, this happened 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, and he did come to school every day. He didn't come to school dressed appropriately for the weather. Now, keep in mind, this took place in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So, for those of us who are familiar with that part of the country, it does get a little bit cold, pretty much starting around November. This could last into February, into March, and depending on the year, this could also last into April. So, rarely will he come to school with a jacket or a coat. Days in which it rained, he wouldn't have an umbrella. So, he walked into class drenched in rainwater. The teacher would ask the student, "Did you do your homework?" We all knew the answer. We would anticipate this with laughter because she would make a joke. She would ridicule him. She would demean him. But again, as children, as 9 year olds, if an adult's doing it, it must be okay. So we're all laughing. Each day, she would ask him that question. Each day the answer was always the same, no. So she would tell him without even asking him. I'm talking as a 38-year-old professional who's worked in the field, who's dealt with parents who perhaps experience complications, who perhaps need some assistance as far as progressing towards becoming the best version of a parent that they could be for themselves and for their children. Without asking any of that, without taking him into the hallway, reaching out to a vice principal, reaching out to a guidance counselor, reaching out to a principal, or perhaps even another teacher, she would say without hesitation, go to the back, dummy. And he would have to sit in the first chair near the row of the what she referred to as the dummy row. And we would all laugh. One day, this happened just like clockwork, and all the matters took place. He came in. I remember it was very cold outside because later in the day, which I'm going to get into, I recall handing my jacket off to a neighborhood friend of mine and a classmate of mine who I considered to be a dear friend. I remember doing that, so it was cold outside. And I was always one, I didn't like to wear a lot of thick clothing. So if I were to wear a coat, it must have been pretty cold. I remember that about myself, and I'm still that way to this day. So that's something that hasn't changed about me. What happened here, she asked the student, just like clockwork every day, did you do your homework? And I remember him having on a t-shirt, and it was cold outside, like I mentioned. So he wasn't dressed appropriately for the weather. And just like every other day, there were hygiene issues. I can tell that he didn't shower, he didn't bathe. I can tell that his clothing was dirty, it was wrinkled, his hair looked unkempt. It matters along those lines. And it was pretty apparent that he was having a relatively rough day. He told the teacher that he did not do his homework. She said, "Go to the back of the room, dummy. Go to the dummy row," whatever the terminology was. And just like clockwork, all of us as students, we all laughed. Now, for some particular reason, this day, normally he never said anything. He was never disruptive. He was never a behavioral problem. So looking back again, as an adult, as a clinician, as a professional who worked with parents who perhaps had these problems, why didn't the teacher, why didn't the school intervene? Perhaps there were other services that were already in place that I wasn't aware of course, as a 9-year-old fourth grader. But for some reason, this particular student, out of 30 other children in the classroom, and an approximate number, he had said to me, he said, "Josh, you're not going to be laughing after school." And I was pretty taken aback by that because one, I wasn't the only person laughing. I wasn't laughing the hardest. And I remember this very well because, like I said at the beginning stages of this episode, this is something that I've thought about during the past 29, 30 years or so. I think about it very often. I have no idea why these memories are triggered. I have no idea why he comes to my mind. This wasn't someone that I was close to. Besides this particular day, I don't believe we've ever had any interaction or any engagements with each other. So I have no idea why he comes to mind very often, even to this day, which is pretty evident. I'm leading off this episode talking about him and experience from the fourth grade. So pretty much what I knew what that meant. That meant that he was challenging me to a fight after school. And after he told me that I wouldn't be laughing after school, he shared with me that in front of the classroom that he would like to meet me at the park down the street from the school where fights were held after school. There was an unwritten rule: if you're not fighting on school grounds, you couldn't get suspended. And I recall this being a Friday. I was very afraid. I did not want to fight him. He was bigger. He had a mustache coming in. He was older. Uh, I assumed he was stronger. I literally did everything I could that day to get detention. I cursed at, which I never did. I cursed at every teacher. Whenever that door was open, I cursed at every teacher. I just wanted someone to keep me after school so he can go away so I can have the weekend to figure out how I was going to take care of this. Every teacher literally that I cursed out or I was derogatory towards or whom I was disrespectful towards, they all said, "You know what, Josh, you're lucky I have this to take care of. You're lucky I have that to take care of. But on Monday, you're definitely going to pay for this." But I'm like, I don't want to deal with this Monday. I want to deal with this today because I have this student who's about to who threatened to beat me up, and I'm pretty sure he's going to follow through with that particular threat. But I was also a little bit confused about why he challenged me of all people. There were a lot. other people that he could have challenged. And where I'm going at is I'm not saying that I was the toughest guy in the class or the toughest guy in the school, but everyone knew, and I made sure everyone knew, I was pretty proud of this. Everyone knew I was involved with wrestling, with boxing, and with karate, and I was doing pretty well. So I was doing all this at the same time, so I can take care of myself in a one-on-one setting. So I was curious, why did he pick me of all the other people that he could have picked? He could have picked on, or he could have selected a couple of other people rather than me. But here it was the fastest school day of my life. This was around 10:30, 10:35, 10:40, shortly before recess. And I swear, I literally looked at the clock. It was like a cartoon. I could see that minute hand just spinning expeditiously, which makes the hour hand spin pretty fast as well. Before you know it, it was 2:45, and here I am. I had to pack up. I'm asking all of my friends for help, and everyone's afraid. They said, "You're on your own. You got it." And everyone, the entire school, came to the park to see this fight. And I guess luckily for me, I was able to keep him off of me. I was able to handle myself. I was able to overpower him with all of the training and experience I've had as far as combat sports. And I recall hitting him a few times, and he fell a couple of times. And as he was getting up, probably around the third or fourth time, I remember whispering to him. I came close to him. I put him in what's called a Muay Thai plum, something I learned, which hopefully none of my instructors ever learned about this or ever will. We're instructed to never use what you learn in training in the streets. But of course, I was defending myself. This wasn't something that I used to bully anyone. This wasn't something I used just because I was able to overpower others. I was essentially placed in a position to engage in self defense. I put him in this particular hole, and I whispered to him. I didn't want to embarrass him. I told him, I said, just stop. I don't want to do this any longer. I know I was hurting him pretty badly. I was trying to hold back, but also this is a street fight. I wanted to keep him off of me. And he did end up giving up. I put him down for the fourth time. I remember after the fourth time, he stayed on the ground. And I guess that was his notification that this is now coming to an end. And I'm going to bring this all back to neglect and academic achievement. I grabbed my jacket from my friend, and the fight was over officially. Everyone walked away. This student never returned back to school. I don't remember what month this was. Like I mentioned, during that time of my life, growing up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, it does get relatively cold from November through February. Sometimes it's March, sometimes around April. I don't believe it was that close to April, but either way, let's just say it was the last day of March. The school year extended, at least during those days, through June. So let's just say this was the last day of March, hypothetically. He didn't return back to school April, May, or June. Also, keep in mind, I mentioned that he was already 2 years behind his counterparts. So, what I'm diving into is what form of neglect, and I'm just hypothesizing. There are students, there have been students throughout the years. There are students currently to this day at the time of this recording of this episode. They're going through various forms of neglect. Those are the students who are coming to school rather than 8 o'clock or whatever time is applicable for that respective school. There are students to this day who are going to school at 10 o'clock on a consistent basis. They're missing consecutive days of school at a time. And we're not talking about injuries or illnesses or things along those lines. There's just some form of parental or custodial neglect in which that's taking place that's causing these students to miss significant periods of time. And when you miss days of school, academic achievement becomes, I'm not going to say virtually impossible, but it's going to be extremely problematical to experience academic achievement with missing significant periods of time with not going to school, particularly if this is something that's replicated from one school year to another to another. As parents, I am pretty proud to say that our daughter is 14 years, about to turn 14 years old here in the next week or so in the eighth grade. She's done very well, nothing but high honors since pre-kindergarten. And she's done very well. I've mentioned on other episodes that she was she was nominated to attend advanced high school classes as far as science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. She's involved with that program, so I am pretty proud as her father. to at least I like to at least think that I had something to do with that, whether that was just my physical involvement or something that's, and I want to dive into if we have time during this episode, genetic predispositioning through expectations, matters along those lines as far as prioritizing academic achievement. But there are students in which they find it difficult to be positioned to experience this level of academic achievement, and that's something that's always concerning. And I do have an array of subtopics I want to dive into during this episode. But as far as from a neglect standpoint, what do you feel as though positions parents to illustrate a form of neglect in which children are missing days, weeks, and months throughout a particular school year, something that's replicated over the course of multiple school years? And where I was diving into, I was talking about with our daughter experiencing such significant bouts of academic achievements, with her going into the ninth grade here shortly. She's only missed one day of school, including pre-kindergarten, which she took part in at 4 years old. She's only missed one day of school, and during that day, she was very violently ill. And with the way in which we conditioned her to prioritize academic attendance, she still wanted to go to school, and she must have been very ill. I recall telling her that you're not going to school today. And of course, I wasn't. I was more so focused on her physical well-being, getting medicated, getting some rest, getting hydrated, and matters along those lines. But she was very disappointed that she was held out of school for that one day, and she was really bummed out about her perfect attendance. In addition to receiving honor roll, high academic honors, and things along those lines, she really she takes great pride in perfect attendance awards, and it hit her that she would not be receiving the perfect attendance award for that particular school year, and she was pretty bummed out about that. But I said, hey, it's okay to miss school every once in a while, particularly if you are violently ill, and this is the first day, and perhaps God willing, that will be the only day you will ever miss school. And I'm talking about college, graduate school, postgraduate school, or whatever endeavors that she decides to get into later in life. But what I wanted to dive into is, what form of neglect do you feel as though takes place as far as parents, whether allowing purposely or unintentionally? That's why I wanted to use those words. I wanted to make certain that I use those words purposely or unintentionally, because there could be certain matters taking place outside of control, such as substance abuse and iatrogenic dependence upon chemical abuse. What sort of matters do you feel as though, from a neglect standpoint, that put parents in a position to not make certain their children are prioritizing perfect attendance, if we're able to do so, in academic achievement?
I think like as far as school goes, it could be like besides it being like a substance abuse issue, as far as the parent being under the influence of something, so they don't get up, they don't set alarm clocks to make sure their child gets to school. It could also be like it could be something that has happened for generations, like in their family when they were going to school, the parent was going to school. School was never made a priority. So to them, in their mind, it's not priority because it was never made a priority when they were younger. So they don't know to instill the priority of it into their own child. So they basically make it a generational instance to where school and education is not made number one priority as far as their child goes. So they look at it as it's something that something for them to do, or necessarily in some instances, and I believe in this instance where it's looked at as like a form of daycare or childcare, is more so if the parent is in substance abuse and school was never prioritized for them. Sending your child to school, there are laws for it, and it is mandatory for your child to attend school, and they have to attend a certain amount of days. Every state is different, and if they don't attend those amount of days, every state is different again as to the consequences that can occur for that. But in order for those consequences and that recognition to occur that the child is not attending, the teachers and the staff at school also have to do their part to make sure that a lens is being put on that the child is not there. Like as far as the classmate that you had, the not like being older and looking back and hearing the stories, the reason why he had to repeat that grade multiple times is most likely because he wasn't going in the first place. And then on top of that, and then that last year, he probably had already decided that he was done. He wasn't even going for the couple hours to attend that he was attending because the teacher wasn't making it a safe haven for him. So school is supposed to be a safe haven. And if a child doesn't have that, and if it's not being told to them that it's a priority because, hey, you need to go to school in the morning because this can happen, this happens, and this and this and this, you get smarter, you go on to the next grade, you get smarter and smarter, and then one day you can become this. So it's a matter of instilling and conditioning your child for a routine that involves school, and then also giving them a picture of what their future can be so that way that they have something to look forward to and that will make them want to go to school.
You made mentioning of there could be parents out there who perhaps, again, whether it be intentionally or on purpose or unintentionally, you talked about parents perhaps utilizing school as a form of daycare. Whenever I'm conducting an individual, a group, or a family counseling session, I normally lead off with what's going to take place, with the expectations, just and also dive into if the client has something particularly they would like to discuss during our time together. But I just remind people, I will say that my cellular phone is out. It is on silent. I do have to check it just to make sure this will take a split second. I will only answer it if either my wife is calling, and very infrequently will she ever call me during work hours. Of course, if she's calling, that means it's an emergency, or unless one of the schools of my children is calling. If they're calling, there's probably something that's dire that needs my attention immediately. So if it's not my wife calling or either of the schools of my children calling, I will not answer. But I just let them know that, just out of respect. And no one's ever had any issues with this, at least not to my face. What I'm telling them is just being a husband and father first, on top of being a practitioner. I do have to be a husband and father first. So if I do answer the cellular phone, it's only for that particular reason. And I've never had to have done this throughout my career. But where I'm going at was with you mentioning parents potentially using schools for daycare purposes. Where I'm going at was there's a particular client. I've we've had some wonderful individual, group, and family counseling sessions together. But very frequently she will speak about being very overwhelmed, being very irritated by multiple schools. She has multiple children, multiple schools reaching out to her early in the day, early in the morning, early during the school day. And she will say that, why are they calling me? And I'm just paraphrasing. Why are they calling me? They're at school. So we have nothing to talk about until 3 o'clock as far as her and her children. And I'll remind her, I'll say, as a mother, as a parent, wouldn't you want to know what's going on with your children? If you see anytime I see a one of the schools for our children that's calling, my heart's racing. I'm wondering what's going on. It's like I can't answer the cellular phone quickly enough. And normally it's a recording, so we've been blessed to have not had any experiences as far as emergencies up to this point. It's normally a recording, but just seeing that number flash across my caller identification, I get very nervous, very anxious, extremely fast. It's like, okay, what's happening? I'm 45 minutes away from the school or wherever I'm at geographically. Can I get there in time? What's taking place? What's going on? There was a recording a few years ago. There was an incident at the across the street from the school our daughter was going to. There was an incident that had nothing to do with the school. Everyone was safe. Faculty was safe. The students were safe. The school wasn't even notified of what took place until after this happened. So the school wasn't impacted. But we received that recording about that crime that took place across the street from our daughter's school. But just seeing that number flash, I got very nervous, and just hearing what happened, I'm listening to the recording and I'm listening to, they were sharing the details about what took place. So I'm thinking, okay, should I have already been in my car doing 100 miles an hour heading towards school? Is this an emergency? Why is it a recording? But nothing happened there. But what I'm sharing is I'm talking with this client and we're deviating from her treatment planning. We're deviating from her diagnoses and what she has going on in her life between the last time we were together that we should have been discussing. But she was venting over being frustrated over the schools of her children calling her. And I'm diving into, as a parent, I'm trying to get her to at least consider wanting to be bothered. What could we tell someone like her or some other parent, like you just mentioned, as far as using school as a daycare? What could we do to help someone change that perspective, change that narrative, and say it to ourselves? Okay, even though our children are at school, they are still our responsibilities. We do want to be involved in what's taking place, whether it be academically, behaviorally, or from a well-being standpoint. What could we do to help someone not look at school as a daycare option?
Um, it's important as a parent to recognize and understand that school is it's not it's not a daycare. Like they're still your responsibility. They're just temporarily in someone else's care. And by that I mean they're there to learn. They're being taught math, science, social studies. They're being taught things that they'll need to know in order for later in life, in order for them to grow intellectually, emotionally, socially. So you need to look at school as a growing experience. School is temporary. Yes, your kids spend 6 to 8 hours a day there, Monday through Friday, but there are 24 hours in a day. Your child is your responsibility 24 hours every single day. You're there to give them the love and the care and the support that they need, and you have to remember and recognize that that care, love, and support extends throughout the whole day, even when they're not in your eyesight. So I would say just remember that parenting is a 24/7 job. It doesn't end with it pauses for a few minutes when your eyes close to go to sleep at night, but it starts the second your eyes open in the morning. And just remember how necessarily, like, if, like I said, if this is a generational thing, like it happened to you, remember how that made you feel. So try not to instill that same feeling in your child. So like if it made you feel a certain way, if your parent did that to you, say, okay, I don't want to do that to my child. I want them to be and have a different feeling so that way they feel supported.
I think that's a pretty interesting, pretty substantial perspective there. And I wanted to use that to transition into our next subtopic of abandonment and how that could correlate with an inability for a child to experience academic achievement. From a terminology standpoint, abandonment is pretty broad. But what I want to talk about is what I want to center that on. I want to focus on as far as abandonment is, as far as a child not having that level of stability. What's going to take place in my life when I leave school this afternoon? Where am I going to? I've worked with and I've met an array of students, an array of children. There was some uncertainty there when they left school. They had no idea what the plan was. So rather than focusing or concentrating on their homework, it was more so reaching out to others and trying to figure out, where am I going tonight? How am I going to have clean clothes for tomorrow? Will I have clean clothes tomorrow? Not only what am I going to eat tonight? Will I eat tonight? Will I eat tomorrow morning? Will I have the option of having breakfast at school? Will I get here in time for breakfast? So those particular matters correlating with abandonment could position a student to perhaps not have a heightened sense of probability to experience academic achievement. One thing I wanted to address, I know I mention this very often, as far as our daughter, she's 13 years old, on the verge of turning 14 now. She's not, and this hasn't happened for a few years now, thankfully. She's not looking to spend a lot of time in our bed with us later in the evening as we're winding down as a family. We do have a 3-year-old son, also on the verge of having another birthday. He's about to turn 4 years old, and he's just watching him each evening, just looking very relaxed, very comfortable, whether he's on his cellular phone, on his tablet, playing with his toys in our bed. And I feel very proud, feel very happy that I've been blessed to at least have a level of stability for our children, as far as them knowing that they're going to have dinner around this time. There's cabinets and a refrigerator that's always stocked. So if they want another meal, it's there. If they want snacks, it's there. They know they're coming home. They know they're sleeping here. And of course, if there's some sort of man-made or natural disaster, if something happens to our home, as far as along those lines, we'll just pack up what we have. Hypothetically, of course, we'll go to a safe place, as far as we'll just say a hotel, just so we're not impeding upon anyone else's space, so to speak. And we'll still just move along. They'll still be in a safe environment. But what I'm diving into outside of natural or man-made emergencies, there are a lot of children out there who they don't have that level of stability. I've worked with a lot of parents, and I'm pretty proud to say I am a board certified family recovery specialist. Something I mentioned perhaps during each of our episodes that we've recorded up to this particular point. And I work with parents, and I know that when I'm talking about finances, we're addressing that because they'll share with me they just received this, they just received that, these monetary funds. So now we're talking about children being dispersed across multiple counties. I'm bringing this back as a parent, as a practitioner, bringing this back to the parent I'm working with. So what I'm trying to do is get them in a position to wholeheartedly embrace the realization that we took actions to become parents. A stork didn't knock on our door and drop off a child, drop off an infant. We took actions, we made decisions, and we're parents. So what can we do to make sure that our children had that level of stability? Because there is a sense of abandonment. A child is dropped off 2 counties away. It was supposed to be for a weekend, but it's been 3 years. I'll ask, when was the last time you've spoken with this particular child? And I love doing this, not to, I don't, my intentions are never to induce any tears or put someone in a position to be saddened. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to remind them, because perhaps there could have been some sort of compartmentalization, meaning that they could have put in the back of their mind unintentionally that they are a parent, that you do have 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 children spread across multiple counties. You haven't had any involvement with over the span of a couple of weeks, a few months, and in some cases, we're extending years. So what I'm addressing here is what's going on academically. And whenever the answer is, I'm not sure, I don't know, I'll ask, what barriers are in place? What's standing in your way? Why don't we know? And there very seldom is a intellectually sound answer. Pretty much what I'm doing there is I know there's been some sense of abandonment, but what I want to do is I want us to remember that children, and like we proposed when we put this podcast together, there will be times in which things will be discussed that could be slightly uncomfortable. But the idea is to, of course, approach everything in a non-judgmental manner. We just want to create a platform in which we could exchange dialogue and share experiences and perspectives. So that's what this is all about. So what I'm diving into is there is a sense of abandonment there. Is our child or are our children going to school and being the best versions of students they could be? Do they have that expectation of a perfect grade point average? Are we at least striving towards that? Or are they going to school sleep deprived, dehydrated, malnourished, hygienic complications, including perhaps wearing the same clothing every day, clothing which haven't been laundered? So now we're going into an environment, and we all know that children, perhaps unintentionally, could be a little bit cruel. So could we imagine going to school unkempt, hygiene challenges, you're sleep deprived, you're malnourished, you're dehydrated? Are we going to be able to focus academically? So what I'm diving into, if there's a parent listening right now and they just came to the realization and said, wow, that is me. I didn't do this on purpose, but there has been a sense of abandonment, whether it be one child or one of my children, or perhaps all four hypothetically. what can we do to help that parent position themselves or readjust to at least do something from a pro-social standpoint to address the abandonment that they may have induced or that manifested because of decisions that were made, because the level of abandonment and instability and inconsistency could have negative bearing on academic achievement of children. What could we do to help that parent or those parents out?
In that instance, a parent needs to decide, one, if it's been years that you haven't been involved in your child's life, you need to check with the person that's been raising your child first to see if your reappearance will be cause a hindrance or what will happen. You can't just, if it's been years, you can't just pop back up and expect things to be the way they were when you left. Like that in itself is not going to happen, and that would not be a good idea for you to tell yourself that that would happen. If it's just been a small amount of time, I would still suggest talking to the person that you left your child with to see how they're doing, where they're at, and have them help you start introducing yourself back into their life if they've been away from you. Now, if you have your child with you and you just are not mentally present every single day as far as helping with homework or something like that, you can do there like you can write a checklist for yourself, or you could set timers for yourself. Say, okay, well, they're going to be home at this time, so from this time to this time is going to be homework, and I'm going to sit here with them and we're going to go through it together. When they walk in, I'm going to ask them how their day went. So if your child is with you and you've just not been mentally present as far as helping them with homework or checking in on them and everything like that, make yourself a list and set times for yourself, because by doing that, once you do that with a consistency, it will become a routine, and then you won't need that list, you won't need that. It just becomes second nature of doing that. But it's important to stay present in your child's life at all times, because that presence, it gives them a sense of comfort and a sense of security, which then leads to further achievements for themselves because they're not worried about that. Their mind is not focused on that aspect of it. Their mind is focused more on school.
I like that standpoint. And you made mentioning of there's been a significant period of time. You spoke about reappearing and checking with a custodial guardian or another loved one, whomever may perhaps have this child or these children. You spoke about checking to make sure that the reappearance of a biological parent will not be a hindrance. And I wanted to use that to transition into children, our next subtopic, which is children mentioning, touching topics. And that right there, a child could, and I've been a part of this from a professional standpoint, a child could have been, since we use the word abandoned, let's just say whether it be it's been incarceration or a parent had to go away for various stints for some form of rehabilitative treatment, whether it's been substance abuse or psychiatric or mental health. But matters took place, and this parent was away from their child from the age of 8 to 13 years old. So now we're talking approximately 5 years. This child has been with a very loving uh, guardian and their significant other. And I'm thinking of a family very specifically that I'm talking about that I've had the privilege to work with professionally. So this child was involved with piano, learning various instruments, ballet, various sports, various other recreational activities, planned vacations. They were placed in a private school. They worked with tutoring. They were positioned to be successful academically, which was a significant difference, a complete 180-degree change from what life was like with the biological parent, with the biological mother. Unfortunately, the biological father had perpetrated some form of criminogenic offense in which they were incarcerated for an extremely long period of time. So they were essentially out of the picture as well. The biological mother, she struggled with co-occurring substance abuse and mental health challenges that did require various stints, very extensive stints of rehabilitative treatment, coupled with some periods of short periods of incarceration, but still incarceration. There was a lot of inconsistency as far as parental involvement in the life of her daughter, but matters did change. And I just talked about the next subtopic being children mentioning, touching subjects or touching topics to parents. I wanted to also use this platform to make sure that parents understood there could be times in which your child or children could just throw something at you that you may not have been emotionally prepared for. You may not have been psychologically ready for. You may not have even had an opportunity to process it yourself, but now your child is making the inquiry. So in this case, we're talking about hypothetically a parent who's been gone for X amount of time. The custodial guardian, they feel very comfortable with the foundation they have in place. So they're wholeheartedly secure with what's going on as far as the foundation they put in place to at least allow the biological parent to come back around and be reintroduced into the child's life. But the child is asking, and the child's very happy. The child feels loved. They have wonderful birthdays, birthday gifts, birthday parties, wonderful Christmases, and matters along those lines. They're living as a child. So their childhood is whatever took place, did or did not take place in the past. It's insignificant. There hasn't been any permanent psychological scarring. But they're intellectually sound enough to know that this person raising me is my biological aunt and the man that she married, which is my uncle, or vice versa. This child knows that these are not my biological parents. This is a relative, or this is a set of adoptive parents, or whatever the circumstances may be. But either way, the biological mother or the biological parent has been allowed to be reintroduced into the life of their child, of their biological child. We're talking about children mentioning touching topics because this is something that it isn't hindering. In this hypothetical scenario I've given, it's not hindering academic achievement, but we could maneuver some terminology here and maneuver some details and make it in a sense where it could hinder academic achievement. But this particular child, she's asking, what happened? So whenever this takes place, what can we do to offer that parent that assistance when they're in a position to have these set of circumstances presented to themselves? And I'm talking about this parent has not been able, or they haven't had the time to deal with these matters emotionally or psychologically. What could we do to offer that parent for if and when this happens to them?
Um, I'm a firm believer that you should be honest with your kids, and that so even if you're not completely wholeheartedly ready and prepared for the question, in the back of your mind, you knew the question was coming. So I think one of the things that a lot of people don't tend to do, and I think that everyone should do, is be honest with their kids. Obviously, be honest within the constraints of their age, and don't and explain to the best of your ability, again within the constraints of their age. Um, there are things that happen in adults' lives that kids should not be privy to. Not their right to know, even if they think and assume it is. But you don't have to tell them that's adult business. You don't need to know. You can give them some explanation of what happened, because the only thing that's going to happen, the only thing that's going to do is help. It's not going to hurt or hinder anything if you be honest. If you lie and you don't tell the truth, then that is going to hurt the relationship, and it could hurt the child in the long run, because you, depending upon what you say in the lie, could make them think and second guess certain things about themselves. So it's important to just be honest, honestly. And so if you, even like I said, even if you're not 100% prepared and ready for that conversation, you know in the back of your mind it's coming. So just be honest within the constraints of their age. Don't get overly upset if they keep asking you questions. Just take a deep breath. And if it gets to a point where it is becoming too much for you, just tell them, hey, I need a timeout right now. We can continue this conversation at a later time, but I need a timeout from it. It's just getting to be a bit too much for me.
I wanted to remain along this subtopic of children mentioning touching topics because our predominant topic is academic achievement. So now I wanted to pretty much change, like I just mentioned, I wanted to change some terminology and swap out some details. So now we're talking about a biological parent asking their child, okay, we were doing very well in school. we were doing well academically. Now we're having these very poor grades. That could mean that something is taking place or something significant from a from an emotionality standpoint, from a psychological standpoint, perhaps did happen, because we're not going to go from having very high marks to failing just because the child is just no longer interested academically. This is something that happened immediately, and it's been maintaining itself over the course of a period of time. So now the parent is asking, what happened? Now the child feels as though that since the parent is ready, since the parent is making that inquiry, what happened? Like, what's going on? Why are we, we were once mathematic competition champions. We were spelling competition champions. Now we're failing everything. What happened to you? What's going on? Because we don't want to yell. We don't want to place blame or name call. We were once receiving all A's. Now we're receiving all F's, all failing marks. What's going on? And now we're along the lines of children mentioning touching topics. Now the child says, and I'm about to dive into something that could be very uncomfortable. But like I mentioned with this particular parenting podcast, us as parents, there may be times in which we could be experiencing something uncomfortable, and I want us to be proactive with it rather than being reactive. So now the child says, there was something that happened to me around this particular period of time. The child shares the details, and that it aligns, that incident aligns with when behavioral matters did change as far as the child. So the child says, this relative touched me inappropriately, and that inappropriate touching progressed towards various other forms of molestation, progressed towards various forms of sexual assault victimization, and matters along those lines. So now here a parent is walking down the street with their child, just trying to get an idea, okay, what's taking place? Like, is the parent is thinking, is it because I didn't get you the new cellular phone? Is it because I didn't get you a brand new laptop? Is it because you have to share a room with a sibling because we moved, because I just want to free up some money for a couple of years and this is just temporarily? So a parent is thinking it's something along those lines because the child was expecting that brand new cellular phone for his or her birthday or Christmas, but didn't get that. So a parent's thinking on a totally different end of the spectrum. But here the child is saying that, no, I don't care about sharing a room with my sibling. We actually have fun together. I don't care about not getting the new cellular phone. Do I want a new cellular phone? Yes. I didn't get it. It's understandable. I'm appreciative for what I have. But here's what happened. This relative here has been engaging in various forms of inappropriate contact with me. And this has been taking place over the course of months, or perhaps even over the course of years. So this has triggered some various forms of post-traumatic stress, perhaps some form of abandonment, that child not feeling as though they were safeguarded in their home, matters along those lines. So with this form of victimization taking place, there may perhaps be some form of emotional, psychiatric, psychological disturbances that are happening that are hindering this child from being successful academically. So this child has been going through all of this, hasn't told anyone. It's been enduring, he or she has been enduring during the course of months consecutively. They're experiencing various forms of anxiety and panic attacks, knowing that this relative is coming over who perhaps may have some form of psychiatric issues on their own. They know this relative is coming over. They know that they will be alone with this relative at some point, and they're aware of what this relative is going to be involved with as far as inflicting or perpetrating some form of sexually related victimization. So now the parent's told. Unfortunately, throughout my personal and professional life, I've been informed on many occasions that not from a child, but when this person is generally from an adult, but they're talking about when they were children and they did tell someone for the first time. And word got back to their parent. They didn't tell their parent or parents first. They were told that they weren't believed. So as we could imagine, if you're telling the person or the people, mother and father, or whomever the custodial guardian is, people who are perceived to be our predominant protectors on the planet. So if your predominant protector tells you, I don't believe you, what would that trigger? from a psychiatric standpoint, as far as with that child, with the victimization and the challenges emotionally and psychologically that they're already experiencing. So the parents telling you that that didn't happen and we're going to move forward, what could that ultimately lead to as far as the child? And whenever that's tossed back to me, I would be asked, because I'm very proud. There's pictures of you, myself, our children in any office I've been privileged to call my home professionally. I'm very proud to show that I am a husband, I am a father, I am a family man. I will be asked, what would you do if your child or children mention this to you? And I would share with them, of course, this is something just as a, I'm not sure if I want to say as a father, as a practitioner, as a man, as a human being, I would say this is something I've been at least working towards, at least attempting to be proactive with. But whatever my children say, I remind them, I tell them all the time, whatever you want to do, whatever you share with me, you know your father loves you. Well, of course, I'll say, Daddy, you know, Daddy loves you. You know, Daddy supports you wholeheartedly. You know, Daddy will always have your back. You know, Daddy will always love you no matter what. What I'm doing there is, of course, just attempting to be a loving father, but I'm just letting them know, just reassuring that you can come to me, you can communicate with me, you can share me what's going on. And if anything ever happens, hopefully, God willing, nothing ever happens to either of our children to that extreme. But I want you to know you can come to me as quickly as possible. I need to know what's going on in your life. But whenever I'm asked, what would you do if one of your children told you that? I will say that I will, like I've told my children, I will believe them and I will handle things accordingly. But these matters here is what I like to recommend to parents. Whatever your children is telling you that's taking place, let's, regardless of if we don't want to believe it, if it sounds unbelievable, if it sounds unrealistic, let's do our, let's fulfill our investigative responsibilities as parents to at least inquire about what's taking place and then move forward accordingly. So along those lines, we have a child who just told, well, in this case, they just told one of their parents that reasoning behind my academic failure has been because I've been touched inappropriately and it has progressed significantly during the course of a 10-month period. So now the parent is, they're going through all of this apprehensiveness, they're going through all this disbelief, all of this psychiatric anguish, this emotional, this pain that they're going through. What could we offer that parent? And this does happen very, very often, unfortunately, from a sociological standpoint. What could we offer that parent to support their child? And of course, this isn't going to be something that's going to be resolved. I've worked with women and men who've dealt with something like this that expanded the course of decades. So this isn't something that's going to be resolved during one or a couple of individual or family counseling sessions. This could be something that could persist for decades at a time. It could be something that could manifest itself from triggering in the matter from the perspective of triggering other psychiatric challenges, perhaps even to the point of inducing someone endorsing features of various other psychiatric diagnoses. So what could we offer a parent who perhaps reached out to us or perhaps watching this recording and they were just recently told that their child reasoning behind why they've been experiencing academic failure is because their child is going through some form of sexual victimization?
The first thing I would say is always, first and foremost, believe your child. Like that's not subject that someone is going to make up and lie about. Um, Now there may be an instance where someone has done that, but it's not something a child is going to lie about. So first and foremost, believe your child. And then secondly, give them a hug and let them know you love them, you're there for them, you support them, you're sorry that this happened to them, but let's go forward and let's take these steps to make sure this doesn't ever happen to you again. Two, no, it doesn't happen to anybody else, and that you feel safe and secure. So I would say help them take those steps so that way they can start down the path of recovery for themselves. Take them so they can press charges so that way they can feel like their voice is being fully and fully heard and that they're being supported in all aspects of it. take them so that they can get counseling from a certified person that is trained in how to deal with that. Don't just go to any counselor down the street. Take a little bit of time and find someone that is specifically certified in that what they need as far as recovery from that. Because if you are able to find someone that is certified in that type of abuse and the recovery from that type of abuse, they may be able to help them early enough to where the damage does not sustain so far into their life that they're incapable of moving forward as they become adults. They may be able to put it behind them at some point in time. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to be easy. It's not, and it's going to be a long, hard road for your whole family. But you need to be supportive and understanding and help them down this path of recovery that they're going to be on. And just take the time. And you also need to realize that you are going to need to see someone to help yourself with this, because you're going to have issues, emotional and mental issues, from possibly not being able to protect your child the way you had always thought you were. So it's important for you as well to seek mental health support for that.
You made mentioning of it being very important for if there was something along those lines, like I just mentioned, a child sharing with their parent or parents that they've been unfortunately from a discrete standpoint that they've been experiencing some form of some sexually related victimization. You talked about the importance of not just reaching out to any clinician or practitioner that would see them, but also the importance of at least that practitioner having some form of substantiation that they are an expert in what they're talking about. I am very proud to display a couple of college degrees over my right shoulder, a couple of certifications and credentials over my left shoulder, and I've shared with countless clients throughout my career. Anytime you're working with a practitioner, hopefully that practitioner has something, whether that be in their office or on a website somewhere that they can, or something tangible that they can show that whatever we're discussing, I am a subject matter expert in what we're discussing. The reason I mentioned this, which I feel very honored, very humbled by. I've had multiple people make inquiries about me working with their children specifically. I'll share with them that, like I made mentioning during this episode, I am a board certified family recovery specialist. But as far as my college education on various levels, as far as the professional credentials that I do have, I don't have anything that says I can work specifically or I should work specifically with with children. I have worked with teenagers, but that's very infrequent, and they are generally older. And I'll share with the parents that the adolescent brain, from a developmental standpoint, it's different in comparison to an adult. The way which I've been conditioned professionally is to work with the adult brain. As far as the adolescent brain, it's very distinguishing. So I'll make those respective referrals, and the client or clients will usually be somewhat confused by it. But what I'm explaining to them is that if you look around with what I have, you can see what I don't have is anything that specifically says childhood or children or matters along those lines. And I feel as though that we as parents, whether you're paying or whether you have insurance, we as parents, our children deserve the best, because what happens in their life will have bearing on academic achievement. And I want all of our children to be very successful academically, because who knows, with your child prioritizing this or prioritizing that, that could have bearing on some form of illness or injury that I may sustain, or someone I love, whether it be you, our children, or someone else. They could have bearing on potentially influencing the life of myself or you or our children. So I really want us all to prioritize academic success and any matters along those lines, even if it means receiving some form of counseling that could have bearing on whether or not we're successful from the academic standpoint. I did briefly want to touch on a couple of years ago, and I'm going to bring this back to academic achievement. A couple of years ago, I started watching by accident The Big Bang Theory. and it was a very intellectually sound, very entertaining show. One of the characters on the show, one of the main characters, Dr. Sheldon Cooper, he was asked. I wasn't watching this episode; it just happened to be on, but he was asked by someone, by a colleague, what could we do to get women, to get female college students interested in the various sciences? And his character is very quirky. He said nothing, and there was a pause there. So of course the audience laughed. I guess the laugh track was hit. The audience laughed. So after that laughter, he said, "This is something you can't do that at the graduate level on a college or university campus. Get someone interested in the sciences. Then he said it could be done, but it's going to be very challenging." He said this is something that must be done early in childhood. So remaining along the lines of academic achievement, what can we do as parents to get our children positioned to be interested not only just in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, but in academics wholeheartedly? What can we do as parents to make sure that this happens? So if we're one of those parents that this isn't something that's synonymous with our household dynamic or family dynamic, what can we do today moving forward to get our children interested in academics, period?
First thing you have to do is you have to make school seem like it's the fun thing to do. Like school has to be the priority. So you got to be up every morning, you got to be dressed and ready to go. And don't just send them, like if they're riding a bus, don't just send them to the bus stop, walk to the bus stop with them. When they come home from school, ask them how their day went and ask them about the different subjects that they learned. Did they learn anything new and exciting? Sit with them while they do their homework. When a science experiment, when there's a science fair going on and they have to do a science experiment, do it with them so that you guys are learning something new together. You guys are experiencing it together. And by doing that and by showing that you're interested in it and by being present during it, they'll start to want to do more things like that. They'll want to go to school. They'll want to go to school, not just be around their friends, but also to learn something new and interesting to run home and tell mom and dad about. So just if you show that you're interested in it and you put forth excitement into them going to school and what they're learning in school, they'll put forth the excitement for it.
I hope what you offered is something that whether someone's whenever they see this, I hope that's something that someone could at least to at least put into their tool bag sort of and say this is something that if they're not able to do so immediately, hopefully this is something that a parent or parents could implement in the near future, if not the distant future. But this will conclude this episode of the Dr. and Mrs. Curry podcast. Mrs. Curry and I genuinely hope that you found the information informative and that either you or someone you know could benefit from this platform. If so, think about liking and sharing this video. If you have not already done so, consider subscribing to our YouTube channel, which is Dr. Joshua John Curry, ED.D, and hit that notification bell so you could be notified when videos and presentations have been uploaded. In addition to our parenting related podcasts, we have multi-systemic presentations that our organization put together and upload to YouTube. Whenever you have time, visit our website, which is www.drcurryandassociates.com, which will connect you to our company, which is Dr. Curry and Associates. Look into viewing and following us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is at Dr. Joshua Curry. Thank you for taking part in this episode, and we will catch you the next time around.